Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone to the March 13th meeting of the City County Planning Board. Would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Today's meeting is being broadcast live on TV 13 and will be rebroadcast at 10 a.m. Friday morning and again at 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon. Our first order of business today will be the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one is signed to speak in opposition. For public hearings today, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There's no rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed and the board goes into work session, no one is permitted to speak unless a planning board member addresses them for a question. For general use district zoning requests, the planning board must consider the full range of uses allowed in the zoning district being requested. The petitioner may not refer to a specific use for the property. For special use district zoning requests, however, the petitioner must identify the intended use or uses of the site and give specific details on how the site will be developed. Items under Section B of the agenda will require final action by the appropriate elected body, either the City Council or County Commissioners. As such, votes taken today by the Planning Board concerning these items are recommendations that will be considered by the elected bodies during their review of the requests. Before addressing the Planning Board, we will need your name, address, and zip code for the record. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the February 13th and February 27th meetings. Is there a motion?
Move approval. Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposes, same sign. That is unanimous. I'd like to welcome Councilmember Scipio to our meeting again today. I'm now going to call on Mr. Brian Wilson to review the consent agenda.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Our first item tonight is B4, that's case F1657. That is the proposed Hadley Townhome development. They have requested a continuance, automatic continuance to the April 10th meeting to perform additional community outreach. Our next item is case B1, that's W3642. Petitioner is SCG Summit Station LLC, requesting to rezone an LBS zoned parcel to LBL. It's a 4.03 acre site located at the northeast intersection of Jonestown Road and Frandale Drive. As you can see on the location map, the site is surrounded by a mixture of low-intensity commercial zoning along both the Jonestown Road and Country Club Road corridors. And then there are there are some single-family neighborhoods to the east and west of the site. And as you can see, some of the current aerial, this site is developed with an existing shopping center. You can see that commercial land uses along the corridor there and those single-family neighborhoods I was mentioning. And the West Suburban Area Plan Update does recommend commercial land uses for the site in recognition of the existing use. Again, the request here is to take it out of special use zoning with the site plan to limited use zoning, to free it up with the site plan requirement for any site plan amendments for on-site design, and also to revise the uses. This was actually a zoning district prior to the 1994 zoning, so this kind of updates those uses and then adds additional low-intensity uses to the request. Staff did find that this was consistent with both the area plan recommendation and 42045, and staff does recommend approval of this request.
Any questions? All right, no one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the motion of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move the planning board recommend approval of W3642.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is also unanimous.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, item B2 will move to a public hearing. So we're on to item B3. That's case W3644. Petitioner is Family Services Incorporated. This is for Family Services of Forsyth County, requesting to rezone an RS12S and RS7 zone property to RM12S. It's a 3.86 acre site located at the southeast intersection of Terrace Avenue and Kentucky Avenue. The petitioner is essentially requesting to rezone the property to realign the existing non-conforming use to an appropriate zoning district, and also to seek approval for the revised site plan to redevelop the site. As you can see here, the site is bordered by single-family zoning to the west and to the north, some multifamily zoning to the northeast, and then there's industrial zoning to the east across Brushy Fork Creek, and then to the south across Salem Parkway corridor there. And this is the current aerial. You can see the site is currently developed with an existing building and parking. They are proposing the expansion here. I'll get into that in just a moment. You can see the balance of the property is heavily wooded and undeveloped. And the East-Northeast Winston-Salem area plan update does recognize the existing institutional land use for the site. And here's the proposed site plan. It illustrates the redevelopment of the site for a new 15,543 square foot building with attendant parking. The site plan illustrates the reutilization of an already developed area with minimal expansion of the built upon area, somewhere around 3,000 square feet. The bulk of the property is proposed to remain undisturbed. During interdepartmental review, the site plan was found to meet all zoning and use-specific standards. So the site plan does meet all UDO requirements. The request is consistent with both Ford 2045 and the area plan use parcel-specific recommendation. Therefore, staff recommends approval of this request. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? All right, no one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move the planning board find the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move the planning board recommend approval of W3644.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposition? That is also unanimous.
If I could just say one thing, I would like to say, if there's anyone here from Family Services, thank you for the community services you provide. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman, our last item on the consent agenda is B5. That's case F1658. Petitioner is Front Street Wahlberg LLC. This is the Wahlberg Road industrial site. They're requesting a rezone from an AG and GIS with a CEDA to LIS with a CEDA. Again, CEDA being Special Intense Development Allocation. This is in the Abbotts Creek watershed. It's a 30.21 acre site located on the east side of Wahlberg Road between Union Cross Road and Business Park Drive. Again, the site is currently zoned AG and GIS. There is some residential zoning to the north, agricultural land to the east, and then you have Union Cross Park to the west and the RDOG facility to the south. And this is the most current aerial. Was the location of a former golf driving range. That's actually the reason for that GIS zoning you can see there. The site is bordered by the existing industrial park to the west, as mentioned. Highway 74 interchange is just to the north of the site, above the top of this image here, and you can see the very edge of the RDOG facility there to the south of the site. And again, I mentioned the parcel-specific recommendation was for that driving range, which is no longer there. However, the area plan did recognize this as a special use land use consideration area for an ideal candidate for industrial development if sewer could be extended. And Legacy, again, this is in the county, so we're utilizing Legacy 2030. It identifies this area as a future industrial opportunity area. And as seen in your agenda packet, there are two site plans for this. This is the primary site plan showing one 420,000 square foot warehouse building. They are showing an internal connection to both Hayes Drive on the north side and Business Park Drive. Excuse me. My apologies. Again, a connection to, I will use my highlighter here. Try to. There we go. For Hayes Drive to the north and Business Park Drive to the south. The proposed plan does show all required road improvement recommendations from the traffic impact analysis. So they did revise the traffic impact analysis from the last time they came through. And it does show a continuation of the enhanced street yard plantings along all public street frontages. This is the alternate site plan. It's basically splitting up that larger building into two warehouse buildings. It's a slightly smaller square footage total, about 30,000 square feet less. And again, the intent of the alternate site plan is to allow for design flexibility based on the requirements of any prospective tenants here. The alternate site plan is highly similar to the primary site plan in overall design, access, and proposed use of the site, and no other, additional traffic impacts are associated with that or estimated. And again, this is a CETA request, so that CETA request will be reviewed by the county commissioners. Staff did analyze that and found it does meet those general recommendations for job creation, location, and access. And these elevations are similar to the same RDOT facility existing to the south of the site. We are maintaining the recommended conditions for exterior building materials, screening of rooftop mechanical and items. And the request was found to be consistent with both Legacy 2030 and the general recommendations, the special land use considerations of the Southeast Forsyth area plan update. The site plan and elevations do meet all UDO requirements, and staff does recommend approval of this request. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
And just a comment, the reason for the two site plans is they could build either one of those and would not have to come back for.
That is correct. That would keep them from having to come from a site plan amendment for, at least in staff's opinion, the same development.
Okay, thank you.
And somewhat related to that, please, I'll think first about the alternate site plan. If someone comes in and needs 20,000 square feet more or less in either of the two buildings, is that a change that can be made at the staff level? Because they're hardly ever exact.
Probably. One of the reasons for the alternative is the city and the county have they have different rules for their staff change authority given to staff. The county's is much more detailed and prescriptive, and one of the findings from for a staff change for the county is you can't add buildings. Even if you're reducing square footage, you can't add buildings. So the site design of the 420,000 square foot building being the primary design, but the alternative design being the two buildings that equal 390 gives them flexibility. I think what we would say is if they have a one building at 420 and then they want to do the separate one, but let's say instead of 390, it ends up to 400 or 410, as long as they don't go over that cumulative 420,000, we would be able to approve that at the staff level without having to go back through for a site plan amendment. So it does provide flexibility, and the reason why they have to have that built in is because the county's staff change authority is much more restrictive than the city's.
And a somewhat related question, but this time relative to use. The building is described as a warehouse. Is distribution included in the definition of warehouse?
Yes.
Thank you.
One question. I like the idea of the alternate plan to be flexible for them. I was just wondering, the case that we had of the convenience store, is that this site or is that adjacent?
It is this site. Basically, you had two plans, and you had the recommendation for, it was a smaller footprint building that was recommended for approval. There was a The convenience store, I can't remember, was it ended up recommended for denial? I can't remember what the recommendation was, but when it got to
I think
the,
you all had denial.
we had denial. I can't
Right.
remember what the end of the ultimate recommendation for the planning board was, but whenever it got to the county commissioners, there were discussions and concerns related to the intensity of that on the corner. The thought process would be if you'll remove that and come back with a larger building, I think there may be, it was thought that would be more in keeping with the plan. So that was the request that was put back to the developer. They kind of analyzed it and ran some numbers. Said, okay, we'll withdraw both cases and bring one case in that rezones the whole thing to GIS or LIS. Sorry.
Interesting.
And I'll always ask the CETA question. This is not an overly large request for CETA.
It's not, the way the CETA bank works is again, it's complicated, but if you're going over the percentage threshold, the entire acreage comes out of the bank. So in this context, because they're going over the threshold for considered low density development and they need the CETA, the entire 30 acres comes out of the CETA bank. And even though, I believe their site plan shows like right at 50% imperviousness, I can't remember what the percentages are, but as long they could come back with a site plan amendment and add additional things onto the site as long as they didn't go over that 70% because they've already taken the money out of the bank. So it would allow them to intensify on this site without having to come back and ask for more CETA. They would have to come back for a site plan amendment.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe there's still 130 plus acres remaining.
And and again, as we talked about last time, there's a checking account and a savings account. There's a whole nother bank in the, basically whenever the county commissioners allocated this, you're allowed to do up to 10% of these sub-basins. They have the 10%, but they only put 5% into checking and they kept 5% in savings. So there's still the ability to even do additional development if needed in that watershed.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
All right. No one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move the planning board find the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. All opposes?
Mr. Chairman, I further move the planning board recommend approval of F 1658, including the CETA.
Including the CETA. Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we'll now go back to case B2, which we will have a public hearing on, and we'll hear from Ellie Levina.
It's 3643.
Oh.
I got it. Sorry, I just wanted to check. Sweet, there we go. Good afternoon. So this is case W3643. The petitioner is Grandview Incorporated. The site is approximately 8.17 acres located on the north side of Yadkinville Road between Transzoo Road and Stimson Drive. The request is a special use limited rezoning from RS9 to GBL to allow for internal and external access storage services. The site is located in GMA3, suburban neighborhoods. The subject property is surrounded by single-family homes to the north and south, with the cemetery and RS9 zoning to the west. To the east are various commercial land uses in the existing shopping center and other businesses within the GBS and LB zoning. The site is currently undeveloped and is heavily wooded and contains an unnamed stream with an earthen dam abutting the property to the north at the terminus of Mickle Road right-of-way. Staff is currently unaware of any specific issues with the status or maintenance of the dam. The subject property is located within the West Suburban Area Plan Update, which recommends single-family residential uses for the subject property. The plan also aims to rezone land for business development in a manner consistent with the recommended proposed land use plan and in designated activity centers. Looking east along Yadkinville Road, the subject property is to the left. Looking west along Yadkinville Road, subject property is to the right. Looking west from the subject property at the intersection of Mickle Road and Dixiana Lane. Looking into the subject property from Mickle Road, you can see it's heavily wooded. And then this is looking from the subject property south across Yadkinville Road at single-family homes. Overall, the request is inconsistent with both Forward 2045 and the West Suburban Area Plan Update, which recommends concentrating commercial land uses within activity centers. This request could promote commercial strip development along Yadkinville Road. Lastly, the request would result in commercial encroachment into a single-family neighborhood. For these reasons, staff recommends denial. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
All right, thank you. We will go into public hearing on this case. As a reminder, each side will have 12 minutes, so please use your time wisely. We'll first go with the proponents speaking. We have Rennie Adcock, I think I said that right, Mike Richards, Nick Blackwood, and Garrett Neal. If you would please approach the podium, state your name, address, and zip code for the record, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right,
So
good.
hit start as soon as he starts speaking.
Can pause it.
Yep.
Ask a question.
He's gonna keep the time.
I think we've got 3 people.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, my name is Nick Blackwood, 804 Green Valley Road in Greensboro, 27406, and I have some materials to pass out if that's all right. That's for you. All right, thank you. And with me this evening, as you referenced, Mr. Chair, we have Rennie Adcock, who's the HOA president of the neighboring Mickle Dam Homeowners Association to the north. We also have Mike Richards, who's a property owner that's a member of that HOA. Garrett Neal, our civil engineer, is here to help address any technical questions. And our client, the potential developer, Matt Kostelik, is also here to help address any questions that you might have. So to begin, if you'd flip with me to the second page of your packet, I know that these zoning conditions were included in your staff report, but just wanted to cover a couple of them. Initially, with our filing, we submitted a zoning condition that excluded essentially every use under the GB district except for internal and external access storage. That's the plan for the development. After reviewing staff's comments and their recommended conditions and having our multiple neighborhood meetings, we added the additional conditions that you see there. So one of the primary concerns that we heard was mitigating visual impacts from both the public rights-of-way and adjacent single-family homes. So you'll see that we added an enhanced 20-foot type 2 buffer yard requirement along both Transu and Yadkinville Road along the portions of the property that are intended to be developed. We've also incorporated an 80-foot wide type 3 buffer along the northern boundary of our site, and you'll be able to see these more clearly on our sketch plan as we flip through the packet. I think, and we'll certainly touch on this point later as well, but that last condition that you see, the 300 feet of undisturbed area spanning from Stimson Drive right-of-way eastward into our property, approximately to where that stream is located that you heard staff reference. The intent of that condition is to maintain that area as an undisturbed area. One of the main concerns that we heard from the HOA was about potential impacts of not just our development, but any development on that property as far as it relates to the integrity of their dam. We don't need that land over there for our project to work. So in an effort to be good neighbors and address those concerns, we went ahead and added that zoning condition. We also entered into a private letter agreement, assuming, or if we get to the point where rezoning is approved and we close on the property, we'll actually be conveying that entire western portion of property to the HOA so that they'll control and be able to incorporate it as a common element into their community.
Oh, make sure, I got a question for you. you're going to convey the property if you get the project approved?
Correct. Yes. So we're requesting the general business zoning across the entirety of the site to avoid any potential setback issues. We're already pinching our site with that condition. So we're wanting to maintain that consistent zoning district across the entirety of the site, but it would be surveyed and either a subdivision plat would be recorded or a meets and bounds description would be prepared to convey that to the HOA for a common element.
So then the HOA currently has no interest or control on that property?
Correct. And they own the dam that sits adjacent. That's highlighted in a later slide we'll touch on. So they own the dam. They're responsible for the state inspections and the maintenance of that, but they do not have any ownership of the subject property.
Mr. Chairman, if we could just hit pause on.
We are.
Okay.
Working it out.
Yeah, I just want to point out that, again, I believe in the materials that are before you, there is a site plan, there are elevations, and you just heard basically a conveyance, an agreement to convey property. All of that is not something that can be considered as part of this rezoning because it's not. That condition for the conveyance of the property hasn't been proffered as a condition, and this is a limited use request, which doesn't have a tie to elevations or a site plan. So again, I just want to make sure that as we move forward, you're going to hear this information, and that's fine. It can be presented. This is what we want to do, but whenever you consider it, you have to look at it. This is a limited use case, which is not tied to a site plan.
Don't we have the right to require that condition?
I don't think you can have a limited use request and then tie it to an exhibit site plan because that site plan hasn't been reviewed.
Thank you.
And to Mr. Wilson's point, I fully understand that that's a private agreement outside of the scope of what you're to consider tonight.
Yeah, like I said, I just want to make sure that we have clarity again moving forward because again, if I'm not saying that's not a good thing, it very well could be, but there's not any condition of approval related to that. And again, with the site plan and the elevations can't be considered as part of the L because it hasn't gone through the process. So with that.
Sure. And we did, think through that and tried to think of a way that, we could put something on the table for you all to consider as part of your land use decision related to our application. And that's where you see the condition prohibiting any, development or maintaining that undisturbed area within 300 feet of the Stimson Drive right-of-way. So whether we close and we develop the property or that all goes away and the next person that comes along, they're still going to be bound by that zoning condition.
Okay, I'm sorry. I want to explain that again because I want to make sure I understood what you just said.
So, well, let's go ahead and if you'll flip with me to the next slide, we can come back to this GIS aerial. So on the illustrative sketch plan, you'll see that western portion of the property west of the stream without any development shown. So that is the portion that we're talking about to be conveyed to the HOA. With our measurements, we're calculating roughly 300 feet to get from the eastern margin of the Stimson Drive right-of-way to that stream bank, essentially rendering that section of property undevelopable. So whether it be us or somebody else, the HOA's interests are still going to be protected unless somebody comes through another, rezoning.
Okay.
And that is a condition that under other requirements D, that is a condition that they did offer. Okay. So again, that does tie that, but as far as the conveyance, that's not part of it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So if you would flip back with me to the GIS aerial with the highlighted parcels. And staff touched on this, but just wanted to reiterate that we've got an existing activity center just to the east across Transu. There's a mix of various retail uses. You have a Food Lion anchored retail center. You also have some restaurants. There's a post office, just a variety of commercial uses. To the south of Yadkinville and those other blue highlighted parcels, you have several smaller office buildings. And then to the green, and we'll get into the traffic concerns that we heard from neighbors later, but wanted to just highlight that. That's a recent development, several hundred homes that have been approved that are currently being built. So as far as the traffic impact, if there's any burden on the infrastructure currently, I see our proposed self-storage use as being just about as low impact as you can get when considering the number of rooftops that are going up in the area. And when you have those rooftops, it really helps traffic to have conveniently located access to commercial services. So that's kind of the framework that we're viewing this through.
You said it, so I want to ask it. So is that correct that, Chris, that the traffic for a self-storage facility would be one of the lowest categories of, movements?
I can't speculate as to one of the lowest, but it is considered a low traffic generator when you look at it over the span of a 24-hour period of time, a week period of time. I mean, again, you have, just like with anything, you have peaks.
Yeah.
Weekend traffic, folks moving in, folks moving out, those kind of things. But it would not be considered a heavy traffic generator.
Yeah, it'd be a lot lower than a residential development or houses or something like that.
More than likely.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
And Mr. Lamb, we do have a slide later in the packet that covers those
I'll
traffic.
stop asking questions.
If I didn't have you doing this, you'd be better. I'm sorry. Thank you.
So back to the sketch plan, you'll see as I referenced to the north, you've got a very extensive 80-foot buffer. Now that's a buffer that if this site were developed for residential use as currently zoned, you wouldn't have an 80-foot buffer. It'd be a very limited street yard planting buffer. There may be a required landscaping buffer, but certainly not 80 feet. So we think we're addressing the concerns regarding visual impacts from Mickle. We've already discussed that undisturbed area to the west. And the other condition that we added for an aesthetic purpose, you'll see on our sketch plan, this was an earlier sketch before we had some of those neighborhood meetings. So we're showing a 15-foot street yard buffer along Yadkinville and Transu. And again, just per our conditions, that's been enhanced to 20 feet. So I think we're going to have some fairly extensive landscape buffering that's going to obscure this site from view from neighboring single-family homes. The next slide is it's a representative self-storage facility here in Winston. This is more or less what Mr. Kostelik is intending to develop here. It's going to be a one-story product, high-quality building materials. Now, our landscaping along the rights-of-way will be beefed up compared to what you see here. This does not have enhanced landscaping conditions along the road frontages. So just to give you a flavor for what we're thinking. Mr. Lamb, this is the next slide speaks to the traffic counts. So that first figure that you see based on the existing RS9 zoning, and this was pulled from the staff report, if developed to the maximum density based on the current zoning, you're looking at an estimated 373 trips per day. Now, we pulled an estimate from the ITE trip generation manual, assuming 50,000 square feet of self-storage space, which is about what we think we're going to land in when considering all of the conditions that are kind of pinching our site with the undisturbed area and the enhanced buffer. We're projecting an estimated 74 trips per day in comparison. So a significantly lower traffic impact. And we did hold two separate community meetings. We held the first via Zoom before we filed our application. We had a meeting with staff and learned that there may be some concerns in the area from folks. So before we move forward with the application, we wanted to hold kind of an initial feeler meeting. We mailed that notice out to property owners within 1,000 feet of the property, so expanded the required notice radius. I really wanted to get an idea for everyone's thoughts. After that meeting, and meeting Mr. Adcock, who you'll hear from in a second, we determined that through adding some conditions and trying to be good stewards of the property and maintaining that undisturbed area, there might be an avenue for us to gain some support and work with folks in the area to give them a good project, even better than what they may otherwise see if the property weren't rezoned and it were developed entirely for single family. So after we filed...
Sure. What makes an area attractive for this type of project?
So
Is it the new homes coming in, or?
So rooftops are certainly one of the criteria, and I can let Matt address that as well, but I think the primary driver for this site is that you've got so much frontage on Yadkinville Road, which is classified as a major thoroughfare. So the traffic's already there, and you have such a significant number of rooftops in the area, it just makes for the right formula for this type of use. Matt, do you have any other points?
Yeah.
You got 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
Okay, thank you. I'll be brief on this last part. Just wanted to give you some highlights from our second meeting. We held an in-person neighborhood meeting at Old Town Baptist Church after we filed. We heard several of the same concerns, primarily traffic, visual impacts. Again, I think this is a very low traffic generator, and we've done all that we can, I think, to address visual impacts of the site from adjacent single-family homes. And Ms. Smith, back to your question earlier about the dam, the last slide or second to last slide that you'll see in your packet, The red property that's the subject property. The yellow property is that dam that we've been referencing that the HOA actually owns. And they're required to have state inspections every year. They have somebody come out, and it's classified as a high-risk dam because it's Yadkinville Road is downgrade from the dam. So, there were concerns, like I said, not necessarily related to our project, but to any development of that site and potential liability on the HOA, and just ensuring that there's no failure of that dam. So with that, I think it's a good time. I'm going to turn the mic over to Mr. Rennie Adcock, who's the president of the Mickle Dam HOA.
Hello, my name's Rennie, and I'm at 3440 Dixiana Lane, Pufftown, 27040. I think you have a letter in front of you that I have written. Is that right? Did you include it? And I'm not, for the sake of time, I'm not going to read the letter, but just to state that the Homeowner Association has talked in great detail about this proposal. We've spent time thinking about our options. This land is eventually going to be sold, and we have no control over who buys it and what they do with it. Right now, it's single family. We are in full favor of this project. Right now, the whole purpose of our homeowner association is to protect and to maintain the dam. So our first concern is what goes below that dam and how will it affect our neighborhood? Can I keep talking?
No, you're fine. You have,
We got multiple timers
Yeah.
going, and
Okay.
I stopped keeping mine.
this is the official timekeeper.
Mr. Lamb, I know she's good.
You got it.
In 2013, a proposal was brought to the rezoning to make this multifamily use. Our homeowner association collected 300 signatures in opposition of that. With this particular proposal, it's totally different. We want to keep the traffic down. We want to honor our older, established acre lot neighborhood. We worry about people coming into that area and falling into the lake and drowning, and it's our liability. We do have liability insurance. We spend a lot of money and time cleaning that dam. We have the state inspects our dam and tells us everything we have to do to keep it up. This particular proposal will donate the land under the dam to the homeowners association. Our plan is to keep it trees, to keep it natural, to let the streams flow naturally. It is in keeping with the county's goal to honor wetlands and to have natural areas. So this entire property, a third of it is going to be natural trees. And that's what our homeowner association appreciates. There are people who play in those woods. There's deers in those woods. It's just a nice buffer between our community and
1 minute.
Yadkinville Road. I'd like to also let one other member speak on our behalf, okay?
Thank you.
I'll be very brief. Hi, my name is Mike Richards. I'm 3461 Stimson Drive, 27040. I'm a member of the HOA, of which Rennie's president. Just want to address one concern you may have, which is that the recommended use y'all have set up for this area, this rezoning may not be consistent with that, but I'd say overall this actual project does stay consistent with that, because I understand that recommended use would be to kind of preserve the character of the neighborhood and the quality of life, the peace and quiet we enjoy as a single-family neighborhood. And this development would be much less impact to the existing neighborhood than actual residential development, where there could be potentially 30, 40, 50 houses there, people and traffic. And that's why the HOA is in favor of this rezoning. And thank you for your time.
13 seconds.
Happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
I've got a question for Mr. Adcock. Are the folks listed in your letter, are those all of the members of your HOA, or are those just all the ones that are in favor of it?
That's all of them.
Okay. So
There are 13 lots around that lake.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we were donated that dam to maintain in 2013, and we incorporated as a HOA at that point.
Gotcha.
And we had that road closed so that there was no traffic on it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Is there another HOA, excuse me, is there another HOA that covers like the larger Grandview neighborhood development?
There's not. And we're very mindful of all of our other neighbors who don't have the same interests that we do, but we'd love to keep a whole section of this property trees and green and natural.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for the proponents, first of all? All right, we will now turn to the opposition. We have Carly Jacobs, Ryan Double, and Randy Pendergrass. If you would come to the mic and state your name, address, and zip code.
And I think there's another sheet too, but
Oh, and also Nick Smith.
Hi.
Hi.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you tonight. Sorry, I'm super short and super nervous, so.
You're fine.
My name is Carly Jacobs. I'm at 5535 Kane Drive, Pofftown, 27040. It's within walking distance of this property. I'm here to voice my strong opposition of the proposed rezoning at the corner lot of Transu and Yadkinville to allow for the construction of yet another self-storage facility in our area. The reality is simple. We do not need another self-storage facility. Within a 5-mile radius, we have 4 existing self-storage businesses. If you expand that out to a 10-mile radius, the number jumps to 15. And then within 15 miles, we have a staggering 26 storage facilities available to residents. The sheer number of these businesses raises an important question. At what point do we say enough is enough? These facilities do not add value to our community. They do not create meaningful jobs. They do not attract new residents. They do not enhance our property values. And instead, they take up valuable land that could be used for businesses or services that actually benefit the people who live here, like parks or grocery stores or family-friendly retail. Moreover, the presence of excessive self-storage units contributes to a stagnation in the local economy. When we continue to approve these projects, we are effectively signaling that we prioritize vacant storage spaces over vibrant community-driven development. I urge you to consider the broader picture. The data shows that we are oversaturated with storage facilities, and adding another will only contribute to urban blight rather than community growth. So please reject this rezoning request and advocate for developments that genuinely serve our neighborhood. I'm sorry I did not have that memorized and had to keep looking at my phone. And I'll turn it over to the next person.
Any questions first for Ms. Jacobs?
Questions?
All right, thank you.
Cool, thanks.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Dovell. I'm here on behalf of Aubrey Stimpson.
and you can pull that up if you want to.
Thank you. He's right across the way from this planned development over at 4690 Yadkinville Road in Pofftown, 27040. Mr. Stimpson's family's been there for generations. He's related directly to Mr. Poff. And his business right across the way is actually on the footprint of Mr. Poff's historic house from years and years ago. Mr. Stimpson, along with other voices that you've heard and we'll hear from this afternoon, are concerned about the long-term implications here, not just a year down the road, 2 years down the road. Pofftown's been around for a long time. It's going to continue to be around for a long time. And my client's concerned that simply adding on to the commercial strip that's in existence here is not a good long-term plan for the community. People are attracted to live in Pofftown right now because of the charm that it has, that it's had for a long time. As the staff here pointed out astutely at the beginning of this hearing, the Forward 2045 plan specifically contemplates not making decisions like this moving forward for communities. Winston-Salem and the surrounding area, we're really unique because we have such a high population, but not a ton of land to spread out in like other communities do. So when we make these decisions, we have to consider not just what's going to be convenient right now, but down the road as we continue to grow and expand, new houses are being built, what's really going to be beneficial, what's going to continue to maintain that character that drew people to Pofftown in the first place. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. How much time is left?
9 minutes.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Smith. I live at 1130 Heritage Path Lane, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27103. kind of just wanted to come by and talk about this property because it's where I grew up. I grew up in Pofftown. My parents still live over there, as do a lot of my friends and family. So even though I don't personally live there, I know the area well. So I wanted to hit the greatest hits first. So crime, traffic, property values, wildlife protection, water quality, air pollution, noise pollution. All right. We covered everything. So on to the important stuff. So the biggest concern that I have, just having worked with everybody here for 2 years, is that this is a limited use rezoning petition. No site plan. Nearly every other storage facility request that's come into this office has been a special use rezoning so that people can see the elevation site plan and kind of see what the impact is going to be. Because right now the impact is nebulous. No one knows quite what it's going to be because no one knows what it's going to look like. Additionally, when staff gives a lot of conditions, generally it's meant to mitigate severe negative impacts. The more conditions, the more negative impact that's anticipated. So there's a large number of very impactful conditions that are going to severely restrict the use of this property in the way that the developer wants. So generally that's a concern that I have, just seeing that many conditions that are being proposed as a part of this development. Other concern that I had just listening to the presentation was that, again, site plans and elevations in a packet don't mean a whole lot because it's not a special use rezoning. The developers seem to want the benefits of showing a site plan and getting the certainty of a special use rezoning without actually putting in the work to do so. And there's special use rezoning's important for a reason. It provides that certainty. It provides all those things that we as citizens look for when these sorts of developments come in. So that's a big concern that I have as well. Kind of getting into the details of the proposal and the conditions. So I heard the developer mention that there's going to be a 50,000 square foot building or buildings, just 50,000 square feet of space that's going to be used for this use. While the parking spaces don't trigger based on overall square footage, loading and unloading spaces do for industrial-sized loading and unloading spaces, which are 65 feet by 12 feet. 2 will be required. That's going to take up a lot of space. Whether or not that makes the property or the project unviable, I don't know, because we don't have a site plan. I don't know. If sidewalks are required along Transue and Yadkinville, which the 2045 Comprehensive Transportation Plan recommends, then they'll need to provide a 5-foot pedestrian walkway to both roads. Sorry, lost the word for a second. And then a deeper question about access points. Will the access points be off of Yadkinville, Transue, or Mickle Road? There's no conditions requiring them not to connect to Mickle Road, which is a residential subdivision. If Yadkinville, they can't be too close to the intersection of Yadkinville and Transue. If they go too far down, they're going to be too far below a lot of the topography issues on site that are going to kind of limit the development anyway based on that access point. If they access off of Transue, where will DOT allow it? Because the turn signals or the turn lanes for the intersection cover a good half of their frontage along Transue, and if they try and line up with the shopping center's access point, then they are going to be too close to Mickle Road for proper flow of traffic. So concerns there. And again, just not even discussing the issues with connecting to Mickle Road, that's residential subdivision. They mentioned a lot about enhanced street yards. That enhancement consists of 2 deciduous trees, 12 evergreen plantings, and 10 supplemental evergreen shrubs for 100 feet of coverage. There's still going to be a lot of gaps, especially when the initial planting of those is 8 feet for the deciduous trees and 6 feet for the evergreen plants. It's going to take years for this to actually function as a proper buffer yard to protect everyone around this property from the impacts of it. So if the concern is that, a thicker, more substantial one's probably required, even something with a berm. Generally, when we're along major thoroughfares like this, generally berms are a good idea. Just personal opinion there, I like berms. Beyond that, a lot of the concerns that were brought up in the staff report by Ellie, which, great job, Ellie, the concerns with its congruence with the rest of the surrounding area and all of the relevant 2045 recommendations, which prioritize neighborhood level businesses. This is a storage facility that would serve nearby people, but could serve anybody. It doesn't really, like other people have talked about, it doesn't really fuel any economic growth in this area. And I guess just final thoughts. Where's my final sheet? There it is. So My biggest concerns with this too, and I know the staff talked about it, is a kind of a creep rezoning or further strip development. There's nothing stopping this if this commercial development escapes containment within the fence created by the activity center. There'll be incentives to go further and further out. Again, it's nothing that this developer can control, but you can. This is a development that could cause further issues and go further down Yadkinville in both directions or up Transu or in any other direction that they so choose. If we breach containment from the activity center once, there's nothing stopping further breaches as time goes on because there's a precedent that's been set. And kind of just going off of that, design standards for the use-specific conditions for these storage facilities, they only apply to indoor only. If it's external access or a mixture, then the full standards don't apply. So the protections offered by those use-specific conditions only apply to one of the two potential uses of this property. And again, we don't know which one's going to be because there's no site plan. There's nothing. And in conclusion, just going hyperbolic in the other direction, if this developer and the planning board and the city council want to violate the activity center and the land use recommendation and all this, why not go for broke? If we're going to make this activity center bigger, why do it just with an outdoor storage or a storage facility? Why not go for a full-on shopping center, something that's actually going to be useful to the people there? If we're going to do this, let's not do half measures. Let's go all the way if we're going hyperbolic. So this kind of half measure of a kind of sort of commercial industrial type thing, if we're going to go big, let's actually go big. Let's not go small. So my preference would be nothing, keeping it a single-family residential, but if we're going to go big, let's go bigger than this, because this is not nearly enough for what could be done here. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Nick, you used the term, I don't think I've heard it before. I think I understand creep rezoning.
It's same thing as like strip development or just extending down a road. I can't remember what the actual term was. I've been out of zoning for too long, but basically like if this one starts, then the next property might rezone, then the next one, the next one, the next one. Sprawl, that's the words. Commercial sprawl, essentially.
You also mentioned the word precedents, but we're not bound by a decision we make here in evaluating another rezoning application further down the road. By rezoning this, we're not somehow committing ourselves to grant the next one.
I agree.
Right.
You guys are free people. You guys can make any decision you want. My only concern is that right now, this activity center has a nice, precise boundary all around it. This will be the first breakage of that activity center. So this is, again, I don't know all the activity centers in the entire city and the county, but this is the one that looks perfectly bounded. There's not really a whole lot of issues with this one escaping the border that's been established by the comprehensive plan and the area plan. So when I say precedent, it's more so if we have one puncture, there'll be a second one and a third one and more applications as time goes on.
That sounds like speculation.
Oh, it is. So is the lack of site plan. It's speculative both ways. I have to be speculative because they're being speculative. So I would love this as a special use site plan, or special use rezoning, essentially. That's the way that these projects have come in before. I don't know why the developer chose not to come in this time as a special use rezoning. So if this was special use rezoning, I probably wouldn't be here in opposition at all. I would see it. I'd be okay with it probably. But the lack of uncertainty, that's a double negative. The lack of certainty, there we go, is my biggest concern. There's a whole bunch up in the air, and there's no way to know or hold anyone one way or the other to what this proposal is. So,
Okay. Any additional questions for Nick? All right. How much time do we have left?
2.5 minutes.
Thank you.
2.5 minutes. If you'll again state your name and address and zip code for the record.
Randall Pendergrass, 4790 Yadkinville Road, Pofftown, North Carolina. I'm very nervous, so bear with me. Directly across the street from the front of this is probably going to affect me more than anybody. Basically, everybody's talked before me has said exactly what I was going to say. No site plan, so we don't even know exactly what they're going to build, where the driveways are coming in. I maintain the lake across the street for the last 15 years. I do not own it, but I have maintained it. Wondering about the effect on the fish, the environment on my side, the water runoff, the flooding that we have now, how much is this going to increase or decrease it? They talk about a settlement pond, but I've never got any recommendations or exactly what they're talking about or where they're going to put it at on this site. He said no more site plan, no more business past Transu, and I would like to stick with that. The lady over there said, in which I had it, there's already 3 self-storage facilities within 2.5 miles of here. And there's 10 to 15 within 8 miles. So it's already covered as far as this type of business. That's basically what I got to say, and everybody else covered it. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Pendergrass.
Thank you.
How much time?
1 minute.
Mine's short. Hi, my name is Sean Widmeyer, and I live at 3450 Stimson Drive. I'm a homeowner there.
Ms. Whitmire, could you give us your zip code, please?
27040. And mine's more about aesthetics and the fact of crowding, I guess. I just came from work, so we're a little late. But we've been to all the meetings, and we have a beautiful, well-established neighborhood that the neighbors have been there many, many years, have lived there, and I think it would bring the home values down. We have 3 beautiful lakes, and on that property is a stream, and there are fish in the lakes, and everyone enjoys that greenery. And to put more building and property, I don't want a shopping center or anything like that. I would like to keep it the way it is. They have 3 gorgeous lakes, and then they have the woods with the stream coming through. So, the plantings that they discussed in the last, I did the specs on the plantings, are like way too far apart, someone mentioned. It would take years. So a berm, I'm all about berms too, but that's if it goes through. So I think aesthetically, it would be maybe an eyesore to that beautiful community that has been established, and people have been there for a very long time and enjoying it. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any questions for Ms. Whitmire before she takes her seat?
Any questions from anybody?
No, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're good. All right, so we're out of time. Public hearing is closed. Discussion, or would someone like to make a motion?
I just got a question for staff. As this is done, what would the lighting requirements be, or would there be any limits?
There would be. The lighting standards would apply. It has the provisions in there where they have to provide a lighting plan, the bug rate.
Right.
Luckily, I've never had to review a lighting plan myself. But yeah, it would be subject to that, correct.
In the stormwater control, obviously, they can't, the quantity and quality can't change.
Well, I mean, again, whenever it would come through for permitting, it would be subject to the stormwater requirements and regulations and review of city stormwater, erosion control, et cetera.
Well, I was just not relative to those questions, but a lot of perspectives were given today, and thank you all for coming. I can't really get behind this one. I think, I understand the interest of the developer with all the houses and development in the area and the attraction to it, but we have the activity area, and Transu acts as a natural border, as it is the border of that activity area. And so creeping further down Yadkinville, stretching out the commercial for, in particular, this use, but in general, not being a larger, more comprehensive development or some type of meaningful uses or amenities to the neighbors, I just can't get behind it.
Well, I think the flip side of that, though, is there's hundreds of homes being built there there may be residents there that say, well, that's a very useful thing for me. As to whether you need more storage there or not, I personally feel like that's something the market should determine, and this developer seems to think that the market's going to support additional storage there. That's a pretty big gamble to take. I am a little concerned, though, about the lack of a site plan, and it feels a little bit like sort of a backdoor special use rezoning without a site plan, because we've eliminated all the uses except for 2, and we're not really supposed to consider the uses, yet a lot of what we've talked about tonight has been uses, right? And so if you, I'm surprised there's not a rule that you can't eliminate all uses and then still call it a general use rezoning, but.
Well, again, it's limited, and it is a form of special use, and you can do a special use district rezoning and limit it to one use, but you've shown a site plan. The limited kind of is the middle ground between that. I did want to kind of just provide some insight into, sometimes we will make a recommendation to a petitioner to come in with a special use district request with a site plan, but if it's not likely to change the staff recommendation, we don't want to lead someone down a path of expending money if it's not going to change our mind. Now, if the planning board feels like it's something that, we kind of hear you, but, we would rather have a plan and rather have it tied to a plan and send it forward, and we feel fairly certain we could approve. Again, that's a planning board decision, but again, from a staff perspective, we in the past have been criticized for pushing folks towards a special use district request when they wanted to do something else, and it wasn't going to make a difference in our recommendation. So our recommendation was going to be for denial. Either way, I think a special use district plan would provide more assurances. It would tie it to a plan. Some of these questions that have come up could have been answered, but it wasn't one of those things where we felt like we should make that recommendation because it wasn't going to change our recommendation.
But Chris, just in general, wouldn't a special use give us more opportunity to add conditions than we have?
It would give you the opportunity to provide more focused, more target, and again, it's in the abstract because it's a limited request and you don't have a plan, so you can't necessarily think of all the things that you would think of if you were looking at a plan.
And one more thing I meant to mention, the use of the storage facility. Yeah, with all the houses going in, I do get it. And I'm not against storage facilities, but in this immediate area, directly across the street from the shopping center are a row of older houses that time will soon tell that they will probably flip. If you're going to expand the activity center, to me, it makes more sense to go more like directly across from the activity center in that immediate area where you already have the commercial and retail field versus stretching it out, creeping further down Yadkinville Road. So I just wanted to make it clear. But it's not particularly just about the storage, but this expansion in this manner.
Well, to me, this property it's sort of appears to be kind of a leftover from the original development decades ago. So with current conditions and housing cost, development cost, you're not going to duplicate the exam lot pattern that you've got. So that is not really practical to think of at all. So if something is going to happen there, it will be different from what the community is like now. Do you want that difference to be residential? You've got a lot of unusable land because of the topography and the stream there. So it may be something that you want someone to be able to get value from their property, the property owners. But you've also still got to consider how far you're going to change what it's next to with that. And I'm really bothered by the lack of specific site plan.
And I think that's the general consensus too, is the site plan.
But I've made this comment before on cases on this side of the county that has kind of come back to be true. The old "be careful what you ask for because you might get it" thing. So you don't want this. The next time a developer comes back and says, well, we're going to put townhouses there, you may wind up with townhouses. So as Ms. Smith pointed out, change is going to come to that area. It's inevitable. It's kind of just a matter of which change do you prefer.
And I just can't think of anything less intensive as far as the use goes. I'm sure there must be something, but I can't think of it. Cemetery. That's right. Yeah.
There's one adjacent to that.
I think the traffic counts, that's the only thing that's lower, self-storage. I believe it's cemetery. Yeah. I think you're right.
People bury their stuff instead of burying people.
Want to make a motion?
I can make the motion. I can make the first motion.
You have your motion sheet?
Yep. Well, I move that the planning board find that the request is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Farabee, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor of inconsistency, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
I further move that the planning board recommend denial of W3643.
Motion by Mr. Farabee. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Patino. Any questions? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. 2. 5 to 2.
All right,
Thank you all for coming out. This will now go before the county commissioner, so.
This is actually city.
City.
Yeah, so that's okay. This should move forward to the county commissioners meeting, which will be, the city council meeting, the third Monday of April. Tentatively.
If you all want to, those you can stay or you can leave right quick, and we'll take a second to let the chamber clear, and then we'll move on.
That's in the city?
Yeah. That was it.
City limit to the road. Well, it wouldn't be here. It's on that side of the road, though.
That's all county.
The city limit.
Excuse me, we're back in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I only have a couple items. The first item is work session. We will have a couple items for work session in a couple weeks from today. The 27th. We'll have an item related to, if you recall, the zoning case you had probably about 8-9 months ago now, maybe longer, related to the billboard request west of Louisville along 421. We have done some research related to view corridor expansion. I'm still waiting to have a conversation with the county as whether or not that's something they want to entertain, but we've been doing the research in the interim. We just want to present to you what we have found. Even with Senate Bill 382, which you heard from the Deputy City Attorney Contos last month, which limits local government's ability to do downzoning. There's only one parcel in the areas that we're looking at that would allow a billboard that it would be considered a downzoning of. So that one parcel would be excluded from whatever would be adopted. But that's, we will have that before you will also have, and as to yet to be determined, educational opportunity. We'll have someone that will come in and highlight some work that's been done. Again, as we kind of talked about last month, we are late last month, we are still, we're working with the county to move forward 2045 forward. And hopefully Senate Bill 382 will be addressed in one way. There has been a local bill that's been introduced. We'll talk about that perhaps as well. So with that, the only other thing I have on staff report is to hear Mark will give us the April zoning case preview.
So, Mr. Stillman, do you have a question?
It can hold.
Okay, all right.
Sure.
So yeah, our next planning board, well, not our next, but the next public hearing planning board is April 10th. So we have 7 total items, 2 new rezoning cases, 1 continued rezoning. 2 final development plans, and 2 new planning board reviews. One's a private school and the other is a PRD.
All right.
And Mr. Chair, that's all I have under
All
staff
right,
report.
thank you.
I was going to ask, when we meet two weeks from now, one other piece of legislation that I've read generally about this week is a bill that I think has been proposed that would enable planning boards to have the final decision on rezonings when there's no objection. I'd like an update on that if there is one.
Yeah, we could certainly discuss that. You know, it's one of those things I believe we discussed a couple of years ago that we had kind of talked about that with the local delegation that finally got introduced. The particulars haven't been decided upon. Basically, the legislation would give the Winston-Salem City Council the ability to do that, but then there would have to be an ordinance that would be drafted that would come up with the parameters in which that's done. The county commissioners did not want to grant that authority to the planning board, so it would be a city-only provision if it were adopted. But we could talk about that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Is there anything else for the good of the order?
We have our motion to adjourn.
All right. Good meeting.
Folks,